Hello everyone, welcome to today's do-it-yourself video. So today I'm going to show you how you can make for yourself such a cute little cloche hat. So there is a pattern on Etsy. I gave you a link in the info below the video that I bought for this hat, and this is what I've used. And in this video I'm going to show you how the pattern looks like and some adjustments I had to make because it didn't work 100% for me. And then I'm going to show you step by step how you can make yourself such a little hat, and I wish you a lot of fun with the video. When you buy this pattern, you're going to get a PDF file to download, and there are several sheets with more sizes. So the sizes are according to inches, so these are the sizes you're going to find inside. You can clearly see I'm storing it in such a big envelope, and I have cut out only the biggest size because I have quite large head. It looks like that, and I'm going to show you the single parts of the pattern first on this finished hat, and then we're gonna look at it also in detail with the pieces of fabric. So there are 4 parts. This is this part. It is, how is it called? Brim. Yeah, it's the brim. I learned something new. You need to fold your fabric in the middle because this is just the half of the brim, and so that you can imagine where it comes or where it's supposed to be. So this is your brim. You have already seam allowance here, so that's the reason why this is wider than the finished brim. Then there is the headband. I made it a bit more narrow because this is what I like, but this is the original size. I had a little trouble with the size of those two. I had to add at each end 1 inch on the brim and on the headband, otherwise it would be too narrow for my hat. But you're gonna see that more detailed in several minutes, or actually several seconds, because we're almost done with this part. Then this is the side part of the hat. You can see there is a round part, and then there is a thing that looks almost like a band, but it's a little bit rounded, and this is the middle part. The longer side goes in the middle. So now you can imagine how the hat is put together. And we're going to go to my other room, and I'm going to show you the details with the fabric and interfacing and with the lining. Here we have again the entire pattern with ready pieces of fabric and interfacing already, and we are going to go through it piece by piece. First of all, on each part of the pattern there are markings for the middle, and there's also information how many times you have to cut out the piece of fabric, of lining, and of the interfacing. So here we have the side part of the round upper part of the hat. You have it twice from lining, twice from the fabric you use for your hat, which is in my case black velvet, and twice from the interfacing. You're going to iron it on the velvet. The second part, this is the middle part of the round head part, is the same, twice from the interfacing, twice from a fabric, and twice from lining. Now we have the brim. You need to fold the fabric and cut it out so that the straight part is the middle of your fabric, so twice from fabric and once from interfacing. And this will be the headband. I used faux leather for that instead of the regular fabric. Then I have here the lining and 1 stripe of the interfacing. So the adjustments I've used for my headband is for once the width of the headband, because I like it a little bit more narrow, so I took away about 1 seam allowance on one side. I'm going to place it on the pattern now on this ironing table so that you can see what I mean with that, because it's always easier to understand when you see it. And when it comes to the circumference of the brim and the headband, I found out that it is a little bit too tight around my head and it wouldn't fit the pattern. So I added about 1 inch at each side, and I'm going to lift it with the pattern so that you can see where I added it and how much I added. So this goes for the headband and for the head brim as well. The next step is ironing the interfacing on any parts that needs to be made stiffer, which is practically apart from one brim piece every velvet or faux leather part. And then I like folding all parts in the middle and marking the middle with cutting in for just a little piece, because it makes it easier for me once I start pinning the parts together. And I do that on each part. So for example, here I have the half moon thing. I'm going to fold it in the middle and mark the middle on both sides, because it's gonna be easier later. Next thing to do is to perfection your headband. I always take a ruler and draw a line at one side, cut it back a little bit so that it's perfectly straight. And then I take the guide again and I measure the distance from the edge that I have already adjusted to the other edge and cut it also back so that everything is perfectly straight. Especially here, since the faux leather is shiny in contrast with the matte velvet, you would see any imperfections, and I always like working that way with parts where it needs to be perfectly straight. For that, using a guide is always good. Once I'm sure that both edges of the headband are perfectly straight, I will also fold it in the middle and mark the middle on the fold, because it's going to be easier once I start pinning it than on the head. And then I also need to adjust, according to the finished faux leather headband, the lining. Now I start with the parts for the round shape of the head on the top. I take the middle parts and I will start pinning it together. Here the marking for the middle is also a nice guide to have. And I always pin the needles so that I can leave them in when I'm sewing through, which is in 90-degree angles to the edge of the fabric. For sewing through, I have a regular needle in. The position is completely on the left side, and the right side of my sewing foot is copying the edge of the fabric, which allows me to sew perfectly straight. The length of the stitch is number 3 on this machine now, and the tension of the thread, I set it with 4. Since the shape is a little bit rounder, I clip out little triangles, I would say like an inch apart from each other, because it makes the shape nicer once you turn the fabric to the right side. The next step is to start pinning the half moon parts on the side of the middle part of the head, and here goes the same rules. The needles should be put in so that they can stay while you're sewing, because it helps you to keep the fabric in a nice shape. And also you need to be a little bit, I would say, slower here and take your time pinning it together, because anything that is round is sometimes not as easy to put together with the needles, but once you take your time, you'll be fine. So the settings of the machine, the tension for the length of the stitch is 3, it's a regular straight stitch, and again the needle is on the very left position, and the right side of my sewing foot is copying the edge of the fabric and allows me to sew perfectly straight in same distance from the edge. And now we are going to clip out little triangles. Here is it even more important, because this side is even rounder, and when I'm going to turn it around, this is how it's going to look. So this is the left side of the fabric, and when I'm going to turn it, you can press it also immediately from below, and this is what it's going to look like. And here I have already added the second half moon part, and I'm going to cut back the edges so that everything is perfectly straight. Once you are done with that, you can start sewing together the two ends of your headband. I again put in 2 needles, and the settings of my machine are the same, so the tension, the length of the stitch and everything else we've discussed already remains the same. So now I'm going to sew through, and once I'm done I will start pinning it to the round part of the cloche head. Here you have a middle seam of the round part that is also an indicator for you. So on one side you pin the seam of the headband, and on the other side you can use the marking of the middle of your headband and align it with the middle seam of the round shape of the head, and it's going to make it much easier for you to pin it in. Before I start sewing this on, I will remove the little table on my machine so that the arm is free. It makes it easier. And here, for me, it is always important to sewing from the side where the headband is on, because I align the right side of my sewing foot with the exact edge of the headband. That allows me to sew in completely same distance everywhere, and I will make sure that everything is perfectly straight. Because as we discussed, there is a difference in the look of the fabric, and it would really show. Then I'm going to sew through the edge once I've done that. So I turn it around, put in several needles, and here you can sew through either in a little bit bigger distance from the edge of the headband or a little bit closer to the edge, it doesn't matter. If you had a fabric that would stay in shape after pressing it, you wouldn't need to sew through, but the faux leather has kind of life on its own, so that's why I need to sew through once on the machine. I like checking if the headband is really exactly the same width everywhere before I continue on, and the next step would be working on the brim. I put back the little table on my machine and sew through the ends of the brim. The distance is the same seam distance as I used for everything, so the needle is in the very left position. I'm using a straight stitch. Stitch length is 3, tension of the thread is 4, and the right edge of the sewing foot is also copying the edge of the fabric. Once I've done that with both parts of the brim, I pin them together with right side to each other, and I will sew through on the lower edge. Same adjustments to the fabric as I have used for all the cloche head parts so far. Since the edge of the brim has a little round shape, then you need to clip out the little triangles too, in order to make sure that the line is going to be nice. Then you need to turn it around, or like just fold it back so that the right sides are on the top, and you need to form the edge with your fingers. And it is always easier if you then take a dishcloth, cover it and press it, because this fabric will stay in the shape and it's going to make it easier and it's going to look much nicer. The next step is to pin the brim on the head. You pin it so that the part of the brim that has the interfacing on is being pinned closer to the headband. So here on the top, when I hold it like that, this is the part of the brim that has no interfacing on. I'm going to be pinning it from the inside, and I will be also sewing from the inside, because as I said before, it is always better if you use the edge of your headband as a guide, because then you will make sure that it's going to be precise. The settings of my machine remains the same, and I always try sewing here a little bit slower than usual in order to make sure that the line is perfectly straight. At this point we have finished the main part of the head, so you can already try it on. The next step is sewing together all the lining parts, and then we are going to put together the cloche head and the lining. I find it the easiest if I turn the brim up first, and then I pull the lining over the head so that the right sides of both fabrics are facing each other. Then I start pinning from the inside because we are going to copy the seam of the brim. This is exactly the line where it has been sewn on the headband. So this is what we're going to be copying. It's going to be easier to sew through because we already have a guide here. And on one side, you need to mark a place that will remain open because this is the place we are going to need in order to turn the head and the lining back to the right side on the top. So now here you need to sew really slowly in order to make sure that you really copy the line that is already there, and then you need to turn your head. Once you turned your head, there's going to be several inches of the lining that will be still open. Here it depends what you do with it on how far have you been sewing through your headband. If the seam on the headband is a little bit further from the edge, it wouldn't probably go through the end of the lining here, and that could cause that the lining would come open. This is not what you want, so in that case it's better to put in several pins and stitch it on by hand. You need to select a thread that is in similar shade like your lining and make sure that the stitches are not really visible, so kind of stitch it on from below. Once the lining is secured, you can turn the head, put in several pins and sew once through in the same distance that you have done on the upper part. It is always important also to change the thread that is in the bottom part of your machine to the shade that matches the color of your lining. If the seam on your headband is a little bit closer to the edge, you would need to stitch the lining on by hand. You would just need to go once through on your machine, sew it on, and only match the bottom thread to the color of your lining, and that would be a bit faster. But as I said, it depends on how far the seam on the headband is from the edge. I mostly wear my cloche hat with my hair down, or often I wear a side ponytail because I like seeing my hair in the front, but that is of course up to you what you like best. So this is it. Of course you could add some accessories on the hat, or you could add, for example, a little bit thinner velvet band in the middle of the shiny faux leather part. Of course, you could use also different fabric here. It's up to you. There's, your fantasy is needed here. And I just like the, the play of the shiny and the matte fabric. I like that. So this is a personal taste and everyone has a different taste, so that's okay. Anyway, I think the most difficult part for beginners would be to get this really nicely round. Once you master that, you're fine. And my recommendation for you guys would be, when you sewing, do it slowly, especially at the beginning, and make sure that you have enough needles in it before you sew, and make sure that the fabric doesn't get crinkled, I think it's the right word, just like, crushed, so that you have always a nice flat line once you sew through. And other than that, you'll be fine. And let me know if you are going to make yourself such a hat, and if yes, what fabric would you use? Would you use different fabrics or just the same, and what color you would like? And I hope that this tutorial was useful for you. If that's the case, and if you liked the video, don't forget to leave a comment or a thumb up. If you're for the first time here, I would be very happy if you subscribed if you want to. And don't forget to check out the info below the video. There is my Facebook page, Instagram page, and web page. And there's also a link to a playlist with my do-it-yourself videos in English I filmed so far. So if you want, you can check that out too. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great day and see you next time. Bye!